As Stella approached the Wish World atmosphere, she looked down at her stars app and followed the familiar commence appearance change instructions, punching the Wish World outfit selector button. She replaced her silver lab coat with a pink sweater and changed into a pair of cropped pants with white socks and sneakers. Then, holding tightly to the wish pendant hanging around her neck, she said, "Starlight, star bright, the first star I see tonight. I wish I might, have the wish I wish tonight," prompting her long golden pink hair to change to a plain light brown and her skin to lose its sparkly glow. Stella could barely contain her excitement when the stars app told her to prepare for landing, and she touched down on a concrete path just outside of an enormous white building with a dark dome-shaped roof. She picked up the star that had brought her to Wish World, folding it up and placing it in her pink handbag along with her safety glasses. She wanted to meet her wisher right away, but she was also eager to explore her surroundings. Spinning around to take it all in, she realized she was high up on a hill with a view of the entire city down below, where tiny dots of light illuminated the buildings and appeared blurry along vast highways stretching in all directions. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, lighting up the sky in dazzling shades of lavender and pink. It was positively breathtaking. She could have stood there for hours, mesmerized by the view, but Stella knew she needed to get to work. So she took out her stars app and followed the directions, which indicated that she would find her wisher on the other side of the building. After making her way past the many large telescopes, which were built into the low wall lining the path, she came to the front of the building and noticed that there were wishlings all over the place who seemed to be as fascinated by the location as she was. Most of them were holding glamuras, well, what wishlings called cameras, and taking pictures of the building, as well as the city down below and the mountains off in the distance. Many were biding their time, then taking turns looking through the telescopes. Above the entrance to the building were black letters spelling out the words Graffield Observatory. There was also a sign next to the steps leading into the massive building's domed doorway, which stated Astronomy for All. Stella stepped closer so she could read the rest of the sign, which talked about the history of the place. It said that the observatory was built to bring the stars and the planets to everyone because of the great desire people had to see them up close. Stella shivered in excitement as the words sunk in. This place was almost exactly like the Wish World surveillance decks on Starland, only in reverse. There was so much more Stella wanted to learn about this fascinating place, but she noticed her stars app lighting up and silently scolded herself for taking so long to get to her wisher. So she continued along the path until she came to the side of the building, where she saw a paper sign on a wooden post stuck into the grassy hill. In large block letters, the sign said Young Scientists Lunar Eclipse Party. Friday, May 3rd. Come one, come all. Just beyond the sign, Stella saw a girl setting up some sort of equipment. A bit farther away, there was a boy putting together a similar apparatus, and then another boy, and even another. As Stella walked toward the girl, she looked down at the wish pendant hanging around her neck. The closer she got, the more brightly the pink orb glowed. Yes, this was definitely her wisher. "Hello," Stella said when she got close enough. The girl turned around and smiled when she saw Stella. She had light brown hair pulled into two pigtails and wore a yellow and pink argyle sweater with a pair of cropped pink pants similar to Stella's. "Hi." The girl wrinkled her nose and narrowed her brown eyes at Stella. "You're not here for the lunar eclipse party, are you?" "I actually am," said Stella while nodding. The girl looked positively thrilled, if a bit surprised. "Really?" she asked. "Another girl?" Finally. "Yeah." Stella quickly caught on to the situation. "None of my other friends were interested in joining me, so I had to come by myself." "Same here," the girl replied with a slight frown as she extended her arm. "I'm Lindy." "Nice to meet you," Stella said, reaching out to shake Lindy's hand. "I'm Stella." "Nice to meet you, too." Lindy tilted her head and narrowed her eyes again. "Did you bring a telescope?" "A telescope." That must be what Lindy and the boys were setting up, but the large, boxy equipment looked nothing like the sleek high-powered ones used on Starland, nor the ones along the path of the observatory. No. Stella shook her head, appearing disappointed. I was hoping someone here might be willing to share. I'd be happy to, answered Lindy, who became so excited she looked like she might actually lose her balance and go tumbling down the hill. I just finished building this one last night. You built this? Stella stared at the collection of silver cylinders, rods, and boxes. Lindy beamed. Yup. It's almost ready. She turned around and began connecting the parts again while Stella watched. Meanwhile, the sky was growing dark and more people, mostly boys about the same age as Lindy, along with a few younger wishlings and their parents, arrived and set up their own telescopes. Before long, the moon, a bright and full one this night, shone high above them, and tiny dots of light appeared all over the night sky. Stella drew in her breath as she gazed up. Isn't it wonderful? Lindy sighed. It is, Stella agreed, finally tearing her gaze away from the sky to look over and smile at Lindy. Let's hope we can get a good look at the moon with this, Lindy said, giving her telescope a pat before leaning down toward the eyepiece. She turned a knob on the side of the main tube and then gasped. What do you see? Stella asked. The eclipse, it's starting. Lindy replied while still peering through her telescope. It almost looks like a tiny bite is being taken out of the moon. Lindy moved away from the telescope and stared at the sky. Wow, she said, pointing up as her eyes grew wide. You don't even need a telescope to see it. Stella looked up at the sky and could indeed see a shadow beginning to darken one side of the moon, so it wasn't quite as full. Can I try the telescope anyway? She asked Lindy. Oh, yes. Of course. Thanks, Stella said, stepping over to peer into the eyepiece. Through it, she could see the surface of the moon in far greater detail, slowly but surely being covered up on one side. Lindy's telescope didn't reveal nearly as much as the ones on Starland, but considering that Lindy had built it all by herself, it was still quite impressive. As it turned out, the lunar eclipse party wasn't exactly a party in the way Stella would have expected, but it was every bit as fun. Some of the wishlings had brought food and drinks, which they all passed around to each other as they introduced themselves. Do you like ladyfingers? Lindy asked as she held a bag out for Stella. Lady what? Stella gasped. All she could picture in that moment were the limbs of Lady Astrid, or whoever the headmistress at Lindy's school was, and her stomach lurched at the thought of eating a wishling's fingers. Lindy shook her head and laughed. They're cookies, not actual fingers. Oh, right. Ha! Stella smiled and took one of the long yellow biscuits, and after she bit into it, she was beyond happy that she had. It was more delicious than any cookie she'd ever tasted on Wishworld, and it practically melted in her mouth. That's the best cookie I've ever had. Really? Lindy beamed. Thank you, I made them in home economics class. Do the girls in your home EC classes do much cooking? Stella had never heard about home economics before, so she simply shrugged and shook her head. I actually quite enjoy it, Lindy said after finishing off her cookie. There's a lot of science involved in cooking. I don't think most people realize that, especially anyone who says, a woman's place is in the kitchen. Like it's a bad thing. That's true. Stella nodded as she thought back to the Zoomberry cake Cora had made for her bright day during their final year at Starling Academy. She could almost hear Cora saying that she'd gotten the recipe from Stella's mom and tested it in the lab until she got it right, and that Stella would have done the same thing for her. Since she loved science so much. Before the memory could make Stella too misty-eyed, a man who was apparently the eclipse party organizer began to speak to the crowd, providing details on what caused an eclipse. Essentially, he noted, Wishworld was casting a shadow because it had directly lined up that moment with the moon and the sun. So it was preventing the sun's light from reaching the moon. Afterward, when he came over to introduce himself to Stella and Lindy, and then saw Lindy's telescope, he became extremely animated. How old are you? The man asked. 17, Lindy replied. Well, I'll be, he said, shaking his head. It's not often that I see a young lady taking an interest in science. Then someone shouted out, "Hey! Look!"
Yeah.
Yelled out another voice. "It's a shooting star." Stella looked up and, indeed, saw a bright light streaming through the dark sky. Everyone at the party began to
Oh.
and
Ah.
as they noticed the shooting star as well, and several of them wondered what it would be like to see one up close. Stella smiled but kept it to herself. If they only knew how close one was to them at that very moment, right in her purse. "Make a wish," the speaker called out to the crowd, and almost immediately, Stella saw one good wish orb after another materialize, each glowing with its own unique, vibrant color. She sighed happily as she watched the orbs take flight. Even though she knew she hadn't been responsible for creating them, it was all thanks to the shooting star. But it did remind her that she still needed to focus on Lindy's wish, the one she'd already made that Stella was there to help grant but hadn't quite pinpointed yet. "That man sure seemed impressed with your telescope," Stella said to Lindy after he walked away. "He almost couldn't believe you really built it yourself."
Yeah.
"Neither can my parents," Lindy answered. "They weren't exactly thrilled about me coming here tonight." "Really? Why?" Stella felt her wish pendant beginning to get warm beneath her pink sweater and sensed that she was getting closer to the wish that had sent her on this mission. "My mother wanted me to go dress shopping with her for a dance I'm supposed to attend with my boyfriend this weekend." Lindy made a sour face and rolled her eyes. "Why did you come here instead?" Stella asked as her mind flashed back to a bittersweet memory of going to the New Beginnings ball with Ozzy, Cora, and Theodore. "Because, just look at this place." Lindy gazed up at the sky and spun around happily. "All I've ever wanted to do is learn about the planets and the stars." "They are quite wonderful," Stella agreed.
Yeah.
Said Lindy. Then she nodded sadly and frowned as she looked down at the grassy hill. "If only I could be an astronaut one day." Stella's wish pendant grew warmer still. "Why can't you?" she asked. "What's stopping you?" "My parents, mostly." Lindy sighed and sat down on the fuzzy blue-striped blanket she had spread out on the grass, motioning for Stella to join her. "I was actually going to apply for an ASAA scholarship, but they told me I shouldn't bother." In case Stella didn't know, Lindy explained. The ASAA stood for the American Space and Aeronautics Academy, which was a special school that focused on space exploration. "Why would your parents say something so discouraging?" Stella wondered while shaking her head. "They think it's crazy for a girl to want to be an astronaut," Lindy explained, "and I guess maybe they're right. It's not like there are any women in the space program. They don't want me to get my hopes up. But I still wish I could somehow find a way to get that scholarship." Stella noticed that her wish pendant was glowing so brightly that it became almost unbearably hot. Despite the discomfort, this was the best possible indicator of what the wisher was seeking. This was Lindy's wish, to get that scholarship, and it was up to Stella to help her. "Well, you can't get it if you don't apply," Stella pointed out. "I know, but the application has to be postmarked by Monday," Lindy said with a sigh, seemingly resigned to her fate. "So I would have to finish it this weekend." Stella realized she'd have to act quickly. "Well, how much have you already done?" Lindy's eyes sparkled in the moonlight as soon as Stella asked that. "Do you know anything about artificial satellites?" "Of course," responded Stella, who then nodded. Recalling the information Starland had acquired about the device's wishlings had been launching into orbit recently. "Like the Sputnik and the Explorer, right? You can send them out into space and use them to record information about all sorts of things." "Exactly." Lindy seemed both thrilled and surprised that Stella knew so much. "I built one and actually managed to gather a whole lot of data with it. It's not exactly as advanced as the others you mentioned, obviously, but I've made quite a few interesting discoveries with it." "That sounds fantastic." Stella was truly impressed. "Thanks." Lindy smiled, perking up slightly. "I have a replica of it at home, you know, in case I decide to submit it with my scholarship application." "You do?"
Yeah.
"Would you like to see it?" Lindy asked. I'd love to. Stella replied. Okay, Lindy said. But do you need to let your parents know where you'll be? No. I told them I'd be out most of the night for the eclipse party, Stella explained quickly. And they let you? Lindy's mouth dropped open. Yes, they know how much I love the stars, and the moon, Stella said with a grin. You're so lucky. Once Stella had helped Lindy gather up her telescope and blanket, they began the short walk from the observatory to Lindy's house. On the way, Stella thought about the fact that there were so few girls at the observatory that night, and that apparently not many seemed to be interested in science. As the man at the party had mentioned. If Lindy applied for and got the ASAA scholarship, there was no telling how many Wishling girls might be motivated to do similar things. Stella felt a rush of excitement as she remembered what Skylar had said. This is bound to be your most important, but also most challenging, mission yet. It was certainly looking that way.